The FAA requires you to have a certain amount of recent flight experience in order to carry passengers. We call that being current. So let's talk about what you need to be legally current as a private pilot. First, if you're going to act as a pilot in command, regardless of whether you have passengers with you or not, you need a logbook endorsement. And what's it going to say? Well, that you've satisfactorily completed a flight review within the preceding 24 calendar months. You'll hear most pilots call it the Biennial Flight Review, or BFR. And just as with your medical certificate, calendar month means your BFR is valid until the last day of the month. You may perform your flight review with an authorized instructor or by completing one or more phases of an FAA-sponsored pilot proficiency program like the WINGS program. Or you can qualify by completing a practical test for another certificate or rating like a commercial certificate or an instrument rating. Now, the flight review is just for the privilege of flying an airplane by yourself. What if you want to carry passengers? Well, to carry passengers, you need to make 3 takeoffs and landings in an aircraft of the same category and class. And if a type rating is required, it must be in the same type. And all of them must have been within the preceding 90 days. Now, since the rule says category and class, if you are rated in both single and multi-engine airplanes, making the takeoffs and landings in one does not make you current in the other. What if your Skyhawk had relocated its nose wheel to the tail? Well, tail wheel airplanes, tail draggers, as you know, can be a tad tricky to handle, especially during landings. So, as you can imagine, the FAA made some rules specifically for them. Let's assume you want to carry passengers in a tail dragger. Well, you'll have to make those 3 takeoffs and landings in a tail wheel airplane, and you'll have to make them to a full stop. I guess the FAA figures that it's a lot harder to get a tail wheel airplane stopped with the tail still behind the nose instead of in front of it. In any event, they want to make sure that you can do it well. What if you want to carry passengers at night? The visual cues are somewhat different, particularly on landing. Well, if you want to carry passengers at night, those 3 takeoffs and landings that you have to have in the preceding 90 days must be done at night, and they must be made to a full stop. And again, in the same category and class of aircraft, single-engine land or multi-engine land, that you're going to use to carry the passengers. Now, what's neat is that as a private pilot, you can do all this stuff to remain current solo without a flight instructor. Just make an entry in your logbook that shows when you did the takeoffs and landings. If you decide to do your takeoffs and landings at night, your night currency counts for daytime as well, which would be the quickest way to get current for both day and night as far as carrying passengers is concerned. And what is the definition of nighttime for the purpose of carrying passengers? Well, for this particular regulation, nighttime is defined as from 1 hour after sunset to 1 hour before sunrise. Now, what if you start feeling your flying oats and want to fly high-performance or complex airplanes? Well, first let's define some terms. A high-performance airplane is one with more than 200 horsepower, like this Skylane. And how about a complex airplane? Well, that's one with retractable landing gear, flaps, and a controllable propeller. But it doesn't matter how many horses are under the cowl. As long as it has retractable landing gear, flaps, and a controllable propeller, it's a complex airplane. So, to act as a pilot in command of either a high-performance airplane or a complex airplane, you need to have received ground and flight training from an authorized instructor in the kind of airplane you're going to fly. And by the way, the training can be done in an approved flight simulator. Once your flight instructor has given you that training, he or she enters a one-time endorsement in your logbook. And of course, separate endorsements are required for high-performance and complex airplanes. So you need 2 separate endorsements if you want to fly both kinds. Now, here's an interesting regulation. Let's assume you've moved and changed your address. If you change your permanent mailing address and do not notify the FAA, You can only exercise your pilot privileges for 30 days after the move. You have 30 days after you move and change your permanent mailing address to notify the FAA Airman Certification Branch, or you're grounded, period. That's in case they want to address any letters to you. And you know, it won't be one telling you that you've just won a brand new Skyhawk. And there you have it. Knowing what it takes to stay current will allow you to stay flying and, more importantly, stay flying safely.